Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. SaaS, RaaS, and now NaaS. Meter is here with networking as a service. That's NaaS. To bring fast, secure, reliable internet, networking, and Wi-Fi to your warehouse. With just one monthly rate and no upfront costs, Meter allows you to focus on getting connected and getting moving. No installation or hardware cost, and just one monthly fee allows IT teams to do more with less. And most importantly, warehouses save time on network troubleshooting, avoid expensive downtime, and get an overall happier IT team. Meter is already powering connectivity for companies with millions of square feet, including Stored, GoBolt, Veho, Trove, and more. Why not add your name to that list? Go to meter.com/thenewwarehouse to get your first month free. That's meter.com/thenewwarehouse for your first month free.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/newwarehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/newwarehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to have one of my trade show conference besties, I'll say at this point, Anya Skomorokhova. I've had a lot of practice saying that last name. So she is the co-founder at Porter Logic, and we've had her co-founder counterpart, Jonathan Porter, on the podcast before as well. But we're going to talk to Anya this time, and we're going to first talk a little bit about Porter Logic, and we're also going to dive into a discussion around data and kind of the importance of data, especially in today's supply chain and in the warehousing world, and some of the challenges around that, and how some things are kind of coming into play, such as Porter Logic system, to be able to address some of those challenges and really kind of help companies navigate the data challenges that are out there. So, Anya, welcome to the show. Usually I see you in person, so this is a little different. We're doing this virtually.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Yeah, it's funny. Usually we've last couple of years, we've spent all our lives on Zoom. I think you're one of the few people who I've talked to more in person than on Zoom. So
yeah, I think that's very true, actually. Yeah, because we see each other at a lot of conferences, as I said, and I it's very great, to see how active you are out there and being able to try and connect with people and see what's going on in the industry. And I think going to those conferences and trade shows is certainly something that's a way to be able to do that, not only just learn about the technologies that are out there or get a chance to talk about your tech, Porter Logic, or just talk to people in general to see what are they interested in, what is their real needs, and what are their challenges right now. So I'm curious, as you've been to, probably almost every show I think that's out there, I think within the last year, last couple of months of this year at least. I mean, what's your kind of biggest takeaway, biggest thing that you've seen or that's been kind of repetitive from all these different shows?
I've talked to number of different folks, probably close to 1,000 people at this point, just this year alone. And I think one of the big things that has been a takeaway is that all roads lead back to inventory. A lot of times, a lot of the challenges that folks are having is they either don't know what they have, they don't know how much they have, or they don't know where it is. And that can masquerade as a number of different problems, kind of both either on the front end where you're, facing stockouts, or you've got dead inventory, or you're delayed in shipments, or any of those and any of those other kinds of problems. But at the end of the day, it seems that all roads in some ways lead back to inventory.
Very interesting. And I think that that's very true. And, it's because so much, inventory essentially is the product, right? That's what we're shipping. Without the product, what are we really doing in the supply chain at all anyway, right? So, definitely very essential. And I think it's a very interesting takeaway. And I think we'll probably get into some of that in our data discussion as well, because there's a lot of data around inventory. But before we kind of dive into the details on data and all those different types of things, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of Porter Logic for people maybe that are not so familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you listen to Jonathan's episode, I think that was last year, you'll probably notice that there's some differences in how we talk about the product. And that's just because of just the things that we've learned in the market and the problems that are cropping up and that we're looking to solve as well. So, but essentially, in a nutshell, so Porter Logic is a supply chain technology stack. And very particularly, supply chain technology stack for teams who really prioritize and really need flexibility and speed in their operations and don't fit into a pre-existing box. So when I talk about teams, our main focus is helping manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. And the way that we do that is Porter Logic is this visual low-code platform on top of which we can build different applications. You can connect all your different systems together, fill the gaps between your operations, and really automate workflows across your supply chain. So we primarily focus on inventory and warehousing, but a lot of times it naturally spans into things like order management and demand planning and so on. Really, the reason that operations teams, go with Porter Logic or want to use us is they have an intrinsic competitive advantage in how their supply chain is different, and they want to be able to use that advantage, but they can't find an off-the-shelf box that would allow them to build upon that advantage, to be able to delight their customers in the way that they're doing. And so they really need something that's unique, a platform that molds to their operation rather than them having to force themselves to fit a pre-existing box that someone else created.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I did get like a kind of an on-hand demo of it a couple months back at one of the conferences we were at together, and it is really interesting to see just the simplicity, I think, of the platform and being able to, like you said, create different workflows almost on the fly in a kind of a drag and drop scenario and a drag and drop kind of user interface, and I think it makes so much sense to be able to do that, and like you touched on there, kind of that. Your competitive advantage may be the uniqueness in your supply chain and the way that you can do things a little differently, and having flexibility in that sense from a system standpoint, I think makes a lot of sense to be able to add different workflows in quickly or pull out workflows quickly too, if you need to no longer do a step, or maybe there's just like on a one-off project or something like that, without having to go through a lot of kind of customization and things like that you may have to do with other systems. So it's really, really an interesting system. And I think it's really a great approach to simplifying that type of system and being able to really create a great user interface for people who are utilizing it, and, not necessarily always having to rely on your IT team in a sense to have the workload or the capacity to make a change to your workflow, which would take, potentially weeks or months, depending on your organizational structure and resources available. Whereas, somebody even like at maybe an operations manager level, I think could do some drag and drop play in there and get things kind of moving, which is a really interesting thing. So, behind all the systems and everything that are happening, obviously, and inventory itself is data, right? So data is kind of driving all these different things. So tell us a little bit about kind of the power of data, especially now as we look at the current supply chain and everything that's going on. I mean, talk to us a little bit about how powerful is data in our world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, being a tech geek and a data nerd myself, I would say it's kind of the all-encompassing, and it's the most important advantage any business has today. Having good, clean data and being able to gain insights from that data in a timely fashion so that they can respond to the market. Just because these days business changes so quickly and it feels like it's changing quicker and quicker, and you really have to be responsive and adaptive. And it's almost like a canary in a mine where if you have something if you have the right data, if you have the right levels of data and you have the right KPIs that you're tracking, some of those can be leading indicators for what's about to come. And so you'll be able to basically nip that problem in the bud, or you'd be able to address it or capitalize on a new situation or a new trend if you have that data. If you don't have data, what happens is you're really relying on your gut instinct, your intuition, the conversations you've had with other people, what people are saying. It's a lot of qualitative information. And qualitative information is great. Humans are storytellers, right? We love to hear stories. We love to tell stories. And that's how we process a lot of information. But stories can also be false sometimes. And you really need, if you hear a story, you really need to find the quantitative information that backs up that trend in order to indicate, okay, is this real? Do I need to react to it? Is this just noise that I can ignore? Or is it something that is this something that could potentially be threatening to my business or be a potentially a great opportunity?
Yeah. And I think that last point there you have there about the kind of the qualitative being important, but then like when you get down to really that quantitative aspect, I mean, is this really a huge problem? And I do some teaching and we talk about data, and I try to emphasize the importance of making decisions, reacting based on data versus just hearing something. And oftentimes I use an example where we say we have shipments that are being damaged, right? And you hear from the customer saying, oh, I got the shipment that's damaged, and if you just run around and trying to figure out why is that damage happening, but really you have like 3 instances of damage and you have 15 of a wrong item being delivered. I mean, is there resources really make sense to run around chasing the damage when your bigger issue is the mispick? So I mean, I think it's such a great thing that you point out there. Like, it's good to listen to that qualitative aspect, right, from the customer perspective and voice of the consumer, but then you really need to be able to have that data to drive into that and really understand, like, okay, how do I focus my attention resources for my business to continue to grow, not lose, customers or something of that nature, and also really understand, like, how do I improve from here? So tell us a little bit about, the power of the data is there, kind of giving us that understanding of what's going on in our business and giving us that real kind of perspective as to, what's the reality of my status in these different areas, whatever your data is focused on. But tell us kind of how you take that data and where the importance is in playing the role in really optimizing the supply chain, and how does that kind of help you take it to the next level and really get the most out of what you're doing.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, so it foremost starts with having a good, clean data pipeline. So, we always say it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So if you have data sources that aren't clean, that aren't consolidated, that aren't timely, then you're essentially making decisions, or you're backing up your decisions with data that could very well be faulty. The other point is that data also has to be timely. So it has to be in time, and it has to be free of that error. And really what that means is you really need to have data piping in from all of your different order channels. And it has to be almost real time. It has to be cleaned automatically. Your business logic needs to be added in automatically so that people have one standard set of truth that they can go to pull the information or pull the metrics that they need. That's really the way that you can have your people build trust in the data system. I often hear a lot of times, especially for folks who have 12, 13 different sources of data, and people calculate metrics differently on different teams within the organization. And they either don't trust the data or they don't trust each other, where one person calculates cost of goods one way, another one calculates it a different way.
Yeah.
And it could just be because they use different sources or they used a different kind of definition. So really the data cleanliness, the data timeliness, if it takes you 2 weeks to pull together that report, well, you're 2 weeks too late, essentially.
Does it really matter at that point? Yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And I hear a lot of people, especially now, AI has been around since the 50s, but we're back on the third or fourth regeneration of AI in particular. Yeah. And, you've got all of these companies clamoring that, we need AI in our systems. We need AI on top of our data. And the truth is, a lot of them actually don't. You can get 80, 90% of the benefit just from having good, clean data sources and having good, clean standard definitions, and enabling anybody in that organization to access that data or access that report or that metric at any time.
Interesting. And I think, you mentioned in there kind of the garbage in, garbage out. And obviously, there's a lot of organizations that have been around a long time, and, they've accumulated all this data over several years, and then they've, tacked on systems and brought in new systems. Maybe they've acquired other companies that do things differently. And it's all this data kind of trying to come together in a way. And you see a lot of instances where you mentioned maybe you have like 12, 13, 14 data sources, right? Trying to bring them all together, and, how do you get them to be standardized and all these things? How do companies really kind of navigate those challenges? Because I think when you start to get all that stuff and you don't really have necessarily a standardized data processing, or maybe, some of these companies, smaller, medium-sized businesses, wouldn't necessarily have like a data scientist on staff, right? Or anything like that. How do you see companies trying to take these things and then like make sense of them and really kind of clean them up so that they can get to a point where like, hey, I can take the next step in my optimization and get ready for some of this more newer, cutting edge kind of tech?
That's a great question. So really, I think that when we're talking about this we're almost drowning in data at this point. Yeah. And really, rather than boiling the ocean, which would take forever, you really have to have a North Star. And the organization really needs to kind of centralize on that North Star and say, hey, this is the metric that we want to improve. And let's find the data sources and the data elements that could help contribute to that. So basically be very tactical around how you're going to navigate that ocean. I'm a big fan of OKRs. And so when I like to set 3 to 5 KPIs that the entire organization is driven by. And when you have that much focus and not to mention these KPIs can change over time, but being able to actually say these are the 3 things that we're looking to improve this quarter, or these are the 3 things that we want to kind of clean, solidify, and build the reporting on. Then you have basically a roadmap of how to navigate that ocean. And so they're going to be able to take better direction in order to navigate through that data and in order to improve that particular KPI. Because what else happens sometimes is if you have 10, 20 different metrics that you're asking your folks to improve at the same time, well, it's a little bit like knobs, right? You improve one metric and then you end up inadvertently decreasing a different metric, or you touch something, you move something else up and then something else comes back down. And so you're almost left in this kind of neither here nor there, or even worse, you're just in analysis paralysis where you're saying, well, this source of data is telling me that this is my metric, and then this source of data is telling me that this thing, and I just don't know what to do because they're conflicting. And so when you can give people direction to say, hey, we are focusing on improving this quarter, like to your point, for example, yes, we know that 3 packages were damaged this quarter, but we also know we had 15 mispicks. So let's understand why the mispicks. Let's focus on those. Let's get that standardized, automated, so that we can notice that we can improve that operationally very quickly. And then when the next problem comes up, so let's say the next problem after that is the damages, that's what we're going to focus on at that point. And that's really the only way that you can, without a huge amount of resources and an army of data scientists at your disposal, that's really the only way that you can start to make sense of your ocean of data, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to create that focus, because you have, if you try to just make everything perfect at the same time, nothing's going to be perfect ever. And the reality is that nothing ever will be perfect. I mean, if you're, operating a continuous improvement and all these things, I mean, you can never be perfect, essentially, right? Because you're continually improving. But the reality is that, where are you going to have the biggest impact? And I think that's kind of where, data becomes so important, because it leads you to kind of that path of figuring out, okay, this is the biggest issue right now for my operation. And like you said, okay, for this quarter, this month, this is going to be our focus. How do we, get this from 88% to 90%, or how do we get this from 90 to 92, or how do we get from 95 to 97, whatever the case may be, pushing to really focus on what's going to make the largest impact for the organization right now. And then, like you said, and then you move on to the next biggest problem, right? And the data is going to be able to tell you that, instead of kind of going from just kind of a gut reaction to saying oh my gosh, we have a problem with damages. Run out there and, fix this. And we're going to do 100% inspection on all orders going out for damages, when really maybe you need to up your inspection on the product before your boxes close and all these things, because you have these mispicks in the example we're using. And, I think it makes such a lot of sense to be able to do it that way. So, I mean, when we talk too about the kind of, you mentioned the 14 different data sources, trying to bring them all together. I mean, are you seeing, and, maybe this is something that PorterLogic can do as well. I mean, when you start to bring in systems to manage this data, I mean, are you seeing that companies are looking to consolidate systems in order to kind of streamline that data pipeline and bring that data in more of a standardized way, an easier way to extract and report on?
Yeah. So they usually do a couple different things. Number one is they always just try to throw more people at the problem. And that actually works for you buy yourself some time, and that works remarkably well until one fine morning you hit a brick wall and there's a fire drill. And then at that point, some of your folks are burned out. So you end up losing good people. You're losing money. You're losing your sanity. And that's when it becomes important for them to consolidate that data. And so they start thinking about, okay, is there technology that can orchestrate and connect all of my different data sources together? It also depends on where they are in their life cycle, and how much, even how tied in they are to some of their current providers, where, especially for bigger companies, they've incurred a significant amount of technical debt at some point, where they might have different warehouses on different systems, and they've got, they might have, for those 12 different sources of data, they have 10 different legacy systems. And so migrating all of them at once becomes really impossible. It's a multi-year type of event. And so what they're doing at that point is they're looking at technology that can either sit on top of, or that can fill in the gaps, or that can kind of sort of as I mentioned, orchestrate the movement of data between all those different pieces, almost like a quarterback in that sense. If they don't have any, if they're a little bit younger, if let's say they don't have any kinds of really big systems, let's say that they've got some out of the box software, or maybe they're just, I've seen spreadsheets that manage hundreds of millions of products. I don't recommend it, but it still definitely happens. There's the analyst who wakes up in the morning, presses a button, waits for that spreadsheet to run 40 minutes while they're getting their coffee. So those kinds of folks, they're usually looking for a solution that can really grow with them. So, today they need XYZ, but tomorrow they might need ABC. And so they're looking at technology that can grow and mature and change with them, because that's really the only standard that we know these days. Is we don't know what's going to happen in the future, except that it's going to change. And probably at least 50% of our assumptions or predictions are going to be wrong. And so the best thing that you can do at that point is equip your company with the tools to be able to respond and adapt to those changes quickly, rather than trying to predict or trying to create the perfect solution for 3, 5, 10 years down the line.
Yeah. And I think that it really makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you see, especially I think with COVID, obviously, it's such a realization, I think, for a lot of companies, and being able to see that, like, hey, if business has been the same for 10 years, like, it could change like that, like, no problem. I mean, we look at like so many companies that had to switch to, like an omni-channel type of solution to be able to survive, and so many that didn't, because they couldn't quickly pivot like that. And I think, to your point, it makes sense to bring in systems that are going to allow you to have that flexibility and allow you to make changes in a quick way and be able to react to certain events that may happen in the supply chain, or different types of things going on in the market. So it makes a lot of sense what you're saying there about that. And, I think as we look at these systems as well, I mean, I'm curious, like, it used to be that, okay, we had this system and basically that's going to do kind of everything for us, but we're seeing so many different systems come out focused on different aspects of the supply chain, and really, coming out and looking, especially with, the cloud-based systems as well, it creates a lot more flexibility to be able to integrate different things. And, how are you seeing kind of that system side of the market become more collaborative, or becoming more, in a way, open to integrating and working with other systems from other companies?
I think that the idea of a walled garden is slowly but surely going away in this industry. And that's because you're very right about businesses realize, okay, I'm doing these 5 things just like everybody else. And so I don't need anything special here, but there's this one thing here that I'm doing that I need specialized software for, that understands my business, understands my nuances. And that software needs to talk to the rest of the other software. And so people are really starting to vote with their dollars about making sure that the systems they have robust connectivity. It's one of the things that I hear all the time is, oh, well, I have this system, but it can't connect to anything. And that's usually the system that they're trying to get rid of first. And so having robust connectivity, being able to play nice with other systems is really the way forward. All of these solutions have to be best in class at something. And so the way that a business is going to pick the solutions is they're going to first capitalize on that competitive advantage. So they're going to pick the tool that will help them do that most, and then they can fill in the other gaps around what else they need. And having robust connectivity is really the big thing that they're going to need. And really these days, you just cannot find one system that will do absolutely everything you need extremely well. And that's really okay, because when you start peanut butter spreading all these different, when you start peanut butter spreading basically features in a very large platform, you essentially end up being a master of none. You end up not pleasing any of your different customers because every single business runs their operation a little bit differently. And that's usually why it's such a challenge to find good operational software, because it was, the product manager had to decide, okay, well, I've got these 100,000 different signals from different customers, and I need to take out what is going to be what I'm going to build into that box, which is really the 80% solution. And then the other 20%, they're really relying on your custom development, on your modifications, or they just tell you, hey, we can't do it. You have to go around the box. And that could be okay, but all of those systems really have to talk to each other. And everything that you see in the cloud these days, almost everything's driven with an API. And so all of those systems are very easy to connect to together and very easy to share data across.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm seeing the same like in the market too, as well. Like you said, where, people trying to, the walled garden, as you referred to, is kind of the walls are coming down and, the garden is outgrowing itself and people are collaborating all over the place. And I think it makes a lot of sense because going back to kind of our discussion around the flexibility and being able to pivot and things like that, having that ability to connect with other people or utilize API integrations and things like that certainly allows for your system to grow and expand even more and allow you to keep a customer, I would imagine, in some cases, because like you said, you have a system and I can't connect with these other systems that I need now, or maybe these other solutions that I'm bringing in, whether it's like automation or robotics or something like that. That system's not going to work for me now anymore, right? So I'm going to try and get rid of that one. So opening it up and being able to have that collaborative kind of environment, I think makes a lot of sense, and it's a great thing to see, I think, for the industry too, because I think it all kind of pushes people forward as well in the technology and bringing more things into play. So tell us a little bit about kind of this discussion around data and everything. Tell us some examples from PortalLogic's experience where, how PortalLogic approaches these data situations or challenges. I mean, how are they impacting current clients that you have or customers that you have with PortalLogic?
Yeah, so I can think of one pretty good example. So one of the companies we work with runs a fairly large direct-to-consumer food business. Mm-hmm. So they've got a number of different online channels, some marketplaces, and they actually use a dozen or so 3PLs to fulfill their orders. And the 3PLs are varied in their, let's say, technological capabilities, basically from kind of almost pen and paper and email to APIs, essentially. And the problem that this company was having was that their best-selling food kits were showing as out of stock on their website. And the reason wasn't that they were actually out of stock. It's because, well, let's imagine that, usually you would use a 20-ounce pound bag of rice, but the 20 ounce bag of rice was out of stock, but you could substitute that for 25 ounce bag of rice. Okay. And so what was happening was their system was not smart enough to realize those different changes. Well, when I say system, I mean there's a army of analysts, bless their souls, every single Monday morning they were downloading data from all those different 3PLs and crunching numbers and trying to kind of put these food kits together and figure out how much they had. And so really what was happening was it was saying it was out of stock on their website. They were losing money on those because those were the ones that customers wanted to buy, and it's back ordered. But they actually had plenty of that stock kind of at the warehouses. It was really just the inability to react to and to kind of change some of those kitting requirements. The other problem was that the data was constantly stale. Right. I mentioned that every week they were manually logging into a dozen portals. They were doing the inventory spreadsheet wrangling. And by the time that they finished that, it was already outdated. And so they were constantly playing catch up. And so what we did was we automated the pulling of each of those data sources, even from things like simply taking up an automated email with a CSV attachment that one of the 3PLs was sending, connecting directly to APIs, connecting to reports that were on an FTP server. So basically pulling all of this data together, then cleaning up that data. So that really meant, mapping what kind of column A means in each of the different sources and making that standardized, adding in some of their business logic and their calculations so that they could create their inventory position every single day. And being able to automate all of that really meant that, every single morning when they logged in, they had a new report and they could see what their inventory position was. And it was being crunched while they were sleeping. And what this also enabled them to do was start creating what-if scenario analysis on switching out items in those kits to drive better profitability, to, as I mentioned, get more out of their inventory by kind of reallocating what's in that particular kit. And really what happened as a result after a couple of months of being live, they had $131,000 in savings in direct cost.
Nice.
And a $250,000 revenue uplift. And they avoided having to kind of throw more people at the problem, avoided having to hire more analysts. And it really drove a quality of life improvement for the analysts and the team that they had, where they really started to shift focus to some of the value add tasks and projects that they had been wanting to do forever, but they were just stuck constantly just churning out spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's a really great example. I mean, I can imagine the stress that those analysts were under, especially, as you said, like a dozen different kind of data sources in all different forms, trying to bring that together and then, trying to figure out what on the surface level seems like an easy issue, right? Exchange one component of the kit for another. When you're going through all the data and trying to figure that out, I mean, it becomes kind of murky waters in a sense, you could say, right? So it's great that you're able to overlay Porter Logic and be able to put that in place to be able to make that impact. And as you said, definitely a huge savings and a lot of, recaptured revenue that they were missing out of because they were showing out of stock. So really, really great example there to see that kind of thing. So very interesting stuff with you, Anya, and definitely always great to talk to you and learn from you as well. And I'm curious too, before we kind of close out here, I mean, you guys have been winning a lot of awards here. I'm seeing all the time on LinkedIn, like Porter Logic wins this award and all these things. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's kind of been going for you guys.
Yeah, I think, the response that we've gotten from the industry and the market has been wild, quite frankly, right? We just won Startup of the Year by the Supply Tech Breakthrough Awards. My co-founder, Jonathan, was just honored with an Emerging Leader Award by CSCMP. I think that people in this industry are realizing the value of what we're trying to do and of what we're building. And I really think that we're crafting a new path in the industry and a new way that people think about this software and think about particularly the supply chain software and how their vendor should support them, how their vendor should be able to play with the other systems that they have, and how they should fundamentally kind of change about how they think about this problem. When you think about kind of what people are used to in the industry, right? They're used to, I'm not going to name any names, but they're used to some big folks telling them, well, this is how it's been done forever, and this is how you're going to do it. But especially in the last decade, we've been spoiled as consumers by all of these different better user experiences that we get to see as consumers on our cell phones, on how we even, do our regular banking, or how we kind of go on social media or check anything else. And then, you go back into your office or you go back into your warehouse and you're looking at this old system and you're just like, this is a different world. What century am I living in? And so I think what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to drive that consumer focus and that customer delight and that customer experience into this industry where so many of the operations folks that we work with, they just haven't been taken care of that way. Jonathan has a really great analogy about supply chain and operations really being the lineman for, for the organization. They take all the heat, they take the bruisings and the beatings, and they really don't get thanked for that. They really only get noticed when something goes wrong. And I think during the last couple of years, we've really realized that, and we really started flipping the switch on being able to celebrate them, and to be able to tell them, hey, you are really important. You are critical to this business, and we value you, and you should have better tools. You should have the tools that you need to do your job well, to be able to, drive us further as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an amazing perspective to have. And it's part of the reason why I like Porter Logic so much, because, it is like, why, if something is so easy, like on my cell phone or on my computer at home, like when I go into the workplace, like, why can't I have that same ease of use, right? It is like kind of crazy. Like you say, you go into some warehouses and you pull up the handheld scanner, and it's like, the black screen with green text, and you're like, exactly like what year am I in, right? And how do you, even in that sense, like if you're not investing in tech with, more forward focused user interface and putting that investment into that, I mean, like, how you're never going to attract like a Gen Z person or something like that to come work for you. They're going to be like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to go, make money on TikTok or something instead. I don't know what Gen Z does, but it makes so much sense to be able to do that. I mean, if our consumer life is like that, like, why can't our enterprise life be like that as well? And I think that's a great thing that you guys are doing, and definitely kudos to you guys for recognizing that and bringing something to the market that's making that user interface better and easier to make changes on the fly, kind of as we need in supply chain. So Anya, always a pleasure to talk to you, and really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me today. If people are interested in learning more about Porter Logic, how can they do that?
Yeah, so best way would probably be on LinkedIn. So you can easily find me. I think I'm the only one with my last name on this side of the globe. So you can definitely feel free to follow me or reach out, or follow Porter Logic on LinkedIn. We do a lot of posts just about industry trends, things we're seeing, and kind of around technology and so forth. You can also go to our website, porterlogic.com. And we also have a monthly blog that you can subscribe to as well. We're a big fan of Morning Brew, so it's very no nonsense, very educational, but we also throw a relevant Star Wars meme in there, here and there as well. So we like to have fun with it. So definitely feel free to send me a note on LinkedIn, or send me an email at anya@porterlogic.com.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So Anya, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.